$100,000, that's the bond for a Southwest Memphis woman accused of fatally shooting a man allegedly found hiding under her juvenile daughter's bed. Kendra Scott was in court today to face a charge of first-degree murder for the death of Rodderius Morton. Braille Brown spoke with Scott's attorneys about their confidence in representing her.
Kendra Scott has left jail after posting her $100,000 bond, but her real legal danger has only intensified. Her next court appearance comes August 3rd. And prosecutors still accuse her of first-degree murder. This case has moved beyond the shocking headline into a fight over what Scott intended that night. Her attorneys signal their strategy, believing the state faces a serious problem proving premeditation. Defense attorney Blake Ballin called the situation every parent's worst nightmare and questioned whether anyone could think calmly. He said, "One of the key questions in this case will be whether anyone could act rationally in this circumstance." Yet prosecutors possess two details that could transform panic into murder under Tennessee law. Morton reportedly took a bullet to the back of his head after leaving the bedroom. Scott's daughter also described an alleged warning her mother made before that night. Those details do not prove guilt, but explain the first-degree murder charge. Next, you will learn what Scott's release changes and what the bond leaves completely untouched. Then we will test 5 facts that could decide whether a jury sees protection, punishment, or premeditation. Scott may sleep at home, but carries conditions, public scrutiny, and prosecutors who will use her own words. The latest update gives her freedom while the court waits, yet freedom cannot answer the question hanging over everything. Did the judge's bond decision signal weakness in the murder case, or simply protect Scott's rights before trial? To answer that, you must separate what the courtroom actually changed from what the evidence still threatens to prove. The bond decision changes one immediate fact. Scott no longer waits for court in jail. Court records show she posted bail 2 days after the July 20 bond decision. That release gives her attorneys more preparation time and a chance to build their defense outside custody. It does not erase either charge, weaken the affidavit, or predict what prosecutors may present on August 3rd. A bond hearing asks whether conditions can manage risk before trial, not whether the defendant deserves conviction. So when you see Scott leaving jail, do not confuse temporary freedom with legal victory. The judge also ordered Scott to avoid Morton's family while the case moves forward. That restriction protects both sides and reduces the chance of contact before witnesses testify. Ballin has attacked the state's charge, especially its claim that Scott formed a premeditated intent to kill. He argued that prosecutors expect rational behavior from someone confronting what he called a parent's worst nightmare. His defense can use fear, confusion, and sudden discovery to challenge any claim of calm reflection. However, prosecutors do not need the bond hearing to reveal every piece of evidence they possess. They can preserve surveillance footage, forensic testing, phone records, and witness interviews for later proceedings. Scott's attorneys say they still await doorbell video and the autopsy findings. Those materials could show Morton's direction, Scott's position, their distance, and whether anyone moved before the shot. The truth is simple. The $100,000 bond changes Scott's location, not the evidence confronting her. Courts presume Scott innocent, yet first-degree murder exposes her to Tennessee's harshest criminal consequences. The next hearing may clarify scheduling, evidence access, or the defense's direction, but it will not settle guilt. That leaves one brutal physical fact at the case's center. Police found Morton outside with a gunshot wound to the back of his head. You now understand what the courtroom changed, but the evidence asks a far more dangerous question. What must prosecutors prove before that wound becomes evidence of murder, rather than a terrified mother's split-second decision? Tennessee law does not ask whether Scott felt angry, frightened, or protective. It asks whether she reasonably believed deadly force was immediately necessary against death, serious injury, or grave sexual abuse. The law can remove a duty to retreat, but it does not create permission to shoot every unwanted visitor. Now consider the 5 facts a jury may weigh when testing that belief under Tennessee's current self-defense standard. First, Scott reportedly discovered Morton under her 13-year-old daughter's bed before dawn. That discovery supports fear because Scott did not know his identity or intentions. Second, the juvenile reportedly invited Morton inside, complicating claims that he forcibly entered. An invitation does not settle his status, but prosecutors can use it against an intrusion narrative. Third, the affidavit describes Morton gathering his belongings and moving toward the front porch. That movement may support the state's argument that any immediate threat had started disappearing. Fourth, Police found a wound to the back of Morton's head. That location matters, but it cannot reveal distance, body position, movement, or the exact bullet trajectory. Fifth, the affidavit describes no threat, attack, or weapon from Morton. Self-defense trainer Buddy Smith highlighted that absence. He said, "The affidavit does not allege that he threatened the mother or anyone else at that time." Here lies the central conflict. Scott's strongest defense begins with the bedroom discovery, but her greatest danger begins outside it. Prosecutors can argue that fear turned into punishment once Morton crossed the doorway and moved away. The defense can answer that Scott faced seconds, not hindsight, while assessing an unknown adult near her child. A jury must judge what she reasonably perceived then, not merely what you and I know now. However, first-degree murder demands more than an unjustified shooting. Prosecutors must show an intentional killing with premeditation, meaning Scott formed the decision before she fired. That decision need not exist for hours, but the state must prove reflection rather than uncontrolled impulse. When Morton moved outside, did the threat end, or could Scott still reasonably fear for her daughter? Your answer may change after you hear what the juvenile says Scott threatened before Morton ever arrived. The juvenile statement gives prosecutors a path toward proving Scott considered violence beforehand. The affidavit says Scott previously warned what she would do after finding a boy inside. The juvenile attributed these words to her mother: "I will put a hole in his ass." That statement may sound exaggerated, but prosecutors can present it as evidence of an earlier decision. They can argue that Scott did not invent lethal force during panic because she had already described that response. The defense will attack that interpretation from every direction. Scott did not name Morton, set a date, or describe a specific plan in that warning. Ballin can argue that frustrated parents use reckless language without genuinely intending to kill. He can insist that an earlier statement cannot explain Scott's fear during an unexpected discovery. Still, the wording matches the situation prosecutors describe, which makes it deeply unsettling. Like this video if you want case analysis that separates emotional reactions from evidence. Morton's former teacher, Robin Perkins, has also added a painful human layer to the public debate. Perkins described Morton as having special needs and said viewers never knew the student she taught. She also refused to excuse his alleged contact with a 13-year-old child. Perkins said, "I do not condone his actions of going and mingling with a 13-year-old. Her account cannot establish Morton's diagnosis, intentions, or what Scott knew during the confrontation." However, it reminds you that viral headlines often flatten everyone into simple heroes and villains. Scott can appear protective without gaining automatic legal justification. Morton can make a disturbing decision without surrendering every protection the law provides. Does Scott's alleged warning prove premeditation, or does it sound like reckless parental anger? Before you decide, remember that evidence remains outside public view, and it could reshape both narratives. The public lacks evidence that could settle this case's most important seconds. Investigators may hold doorbell footage, messages, forensic measurements, and Scott's recorded interview. The autopsy could clarify direction, range, and trajectory, while scene testing could establish each person's position. Messages could explain why Morton came, what he expected, and whether anyone planned secrecy. None allows you to declare Scott guilty or Morton deserving of death. Scott now prepares for her August 3 appearance, while living outside jail under the court's conditions. That hearing may reveal how aggressively prosecutors defend first-degree murder, and whether Ballin begins building a formal self-defense theory. It may also produce another delay, leaving the central dispute unresolved. Based only on the public evidence, what charge do you believe these facts actually support? Should prosecutors maintain first-degree murder, consider a lesser homicide charge, or dismiss the case under self-defense? Explain which single fact controls your answer, because that detail shows how you interpret the entire shooting. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we will follow the verified developments after Scott returns to court. Do not let viral posts decide what unreleased evidence may eventually prove. For now, Scott's statement remains both her emotional defense and the prosecution's challenge. She said she did what she had to do. The next evidence must decide whether Tennessee law agrees.